the Athens County Historical Society Museum for putting this on and letting me come here and show you my wares. I looked at the list of people that are speaking this month, and it looks pretty impressive. I'm the only one that doesn't have a PhD out of the list, so you should be able to understand what I'm going to say. I might want to add that some of the people that are going to talk here in the next couple of weeks, we have given Atlatl events at some of their locations, Hopewell and Newark. I want to start out by saying that there's a lot of debate amongst historians and archaeologists about some of these dates and some of the origins of some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to throw out some dates, I'm going to throw out some countries, and you will be able to find contradictions to what I'm going to say on the internet because they haven't quite figured all this stuff out yet. So there's a broad range of some of these dates and also of some of the countries of the origins. I want to quickly define what an Atlatl is, and then I'm going to go through and talk about the history of it, the mechanics of it, and I'm going to talk about Atlatl weights, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the modern history of the Atlatl, and it won't take me too long. The Atlatl is basically an extension of a person's arm. Ancient hunters used to hunt with a spear. They had a spear in their hand. It was no doubt hand-to-hand combat with an animal. The animals would roll over. They would injure ancient hunters. Probably some ancient hunters got their feet stepped on, and they were basically put in danger trying to hunt these very large animals that they were hunting. The Atlatl was to be able to take them back at least 30 meters or more, and to put them in a safer situation. I'm sure a few of them still got hurt. Basically, the way these things work is we hold them behind our head like this, and we bring them forward, and we flip them at the very end. The key to making a good Atlatl throw is keeping your elbow level, keeping your posture up. So when we start our throw, no matter where we start our elbow, we want it to stay level the whole way through. If it starts up here, it stays level. If it starts down here, we need to keep it level. I like to keep mine about a little bit above shoulder height. There are people that actually they throw like this. There's all kinds of different ways you can throw. When we do this, the Atlatl has a little cup, a little spur on it. The dart has a little cup at the end of it, and they match each other. We hold it like this. This is a broken. Behind our head, we bring it forward, and we flip it all the way over. We follow through it, flip it all the way. So that's basically what an Atlatl is and what it does. Talk a little bit about the history of it. The basic Atlatl dates that they use are 25 to 40,000 years ago, and when they think it was invented. These dates vary widely when you look at them on the internet. There's a school of archaeologists in England that claim they're at least 150,000 years old. I tend to use the 30,000 year figure when I'm talking to people, but they are definitely older than 30,000 years. There's also a couple schools of thought of where they originated. Some archaeologists believe they originated in southern Europe, and some archaeologists, particularly southern France, some archaeologists claim they were from northern Africa, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. But to me, northern Africa and southern Europe is about the same place. And we know that ancient people were able to cross those waters there. They were able to go down to Spain and cross over into Morocco. So I don't understand the whole debate thing. I mean, it came from around there somewhere. The reason why they like to think southern Europe is because the oldest known Atlatls are from southern France. But I contend that they'll never ever find the oldest Atlatl. And just like with ancient people they're finding, frozen in ice, old dinosaurs and things like that, every 3 or 4 years they seem to take it back farther and farther and farther. And that's going to keep happening pretty much forever, because they're never really going to find the oldest one, but they're going to find something older. Now the Atlatls that they have in museums in France, which I'm going to show you some pictures of them here in a little bit, they are They're really highly decorative type things with real intense carvings in them. They're beautiful atlatls, and just the very fact of the way they were designed and the way they were carved tells us that there's no way that these were the first ones, because the first ones would have been a simple stick. And we go to atlatl contests sometimes where someone will just go get a branch off a tree, cut themselves a little spur in there, and they're ready to go. And there's no doubt that the earliest atlatls ever were not the super fancy ones that we see in France, which I'll show you some pictures in a little bit. They think that once the atlatls were created in this area here of northern Africa, southern Europe, that within 10,000 years the whole world had them. Except Antarctica. Antarctica is the only place where they haven't discovered any possible use of atlatls. But during that 10,000 year period, it spread around somewhat, but also some areas came up with them on their own. Australia in particular, and some other places. And it really wasn't that hard of a thing for someone to come up with, because they were using spears to hunt animals and possibly even throwing the spears a little bit, and it really didn't take much for them to realize that adding a stick to this whole system was just like adding another elbow and giving them more leverage. The bow was invented about 15,000 years ago, and when the bow, and it also came from northern Africa and southern Europe, and it started spreading across the world, and as it spread across the world, the atlatl went out of fashion in most of the world. The bow was able to take the hunter back 100 meters. It was also able to make their hunting kits a lot lighter. They were carrying arrows instead of spears like this. We call these darts. I'll explain why in a little bit. So the bow traveled around the world. It replaced the atlatl in many areas. There are some areas in the world where the atlatl never stopped being used. One of them was Alaska, and one of them was Australia. They used them all the way up into modern times. While I'm talking about this, here are some Aborigines in Australia. 1914, this picture was taken, and you'll notice that their atlatls, their atlatls are real wide, and their darts are really, really long. Every culture had different types of atlatls. And the reason why is because they had different materials to work with, and they were also hunting different kinds of animals. So depending on what they were hunting would depend on what kind of atlatl they needed and how far they were actually going to throw their dart. So I'll talk a little bit about the mechanics of the atlatl. In the 30s and 40s, a group of archaeologists in somewhere in the United States tried to recreate the atlatl and make these things work. They couldn't get it to work properly, and they finally figured out that their darts were rigid. They were making them like spears. They needed to make them flexible. These things won't fly if they're not flexible. And once they discovered that they needed to be flexible, it changed their whole world, and they were able to control these things, make them fly. We call these darts because they're fat on the front end, they're thin on this end, which is pretty much like a bar dart would be up at Tony's, and they're fat on one end, and they're also weighted in the front. And we also weight these in the front. These ones that we use that are aluminum, we put a little dowel rod up here in the front. Ancient people would have had a piece of flint out here, and that would have naturally made it weighted in the front. They don't really work unless the center of the weight is to the front of the dart. If the weight is in the center or back, they won't really work. The center of gravity would be more toward the front of the dart. So when you cast a dart with an atlatl, and you'll see some pictures of it here in a little bit, as I go to cast these, they basically bend up like this. And then they go like this, and they oscillate the whole way down. You don't really see it with the human eye, but you'll see some pictures here. And that's the same thing an arrow does when it comes off a bow. It oscillates all the way down. So what we do is when the Atlatl is on the dart, we get a pretty one, and you go to bring the thing forward, the basic physics is mass resists acceleration. So you have a mass here in the front. This is broken. Used to have a mass in the front. And as you bring the Atlatl forward this way, this thing is resisting that, and it fights back like that. It bends a little bit. And also the Atlatl is going to bend. See how it's flexible? Now, they used to think that the Atlatl and the dart stored kinetic energy, and when you released it, it released that kinetic energy. Now that is true for the dart. This dart is storing energy as it's resisting acceleration. It's storing its energy in that bend there. It releases it when you let it go. But it's not really true that these have kinetic energy in them. What's happening here is, as you go to cast your dart, these things bend back, but as your dart's cast, they haven't flipped forward yet. So they really aren't releasing any energy like you think, or like they used to think that they did. Show you a couple pictures here of, since we're talking about the history. These are petroglyphs in Nevada, and you can see these are just Atlatls that they had drawn on some rocks. I don't have the dates for these. This one here is called Atlatl Rock. It's right outside of Las Vegas. And you can see there's an Atlatl right there. You can see a bent dart. And it looks like someone's throwing one right there. And I don't know if these represent darts here being thrown or not, but it's kind of funny because they're throwing into like what we would, a target like we would. But some of these things, I'm not quite sure what they represent, even though a lot of people have figured them all out. But this is showing Atlatls. This is Atlatl Rock, and it's about 15 miles from Las Vegas. This is a reproduction. This is the oldest known Atlatl in the world. It's approximately 20,000 years old. It's in a museum in France. This is the reproduction, and I'm going to show you some pictures of the real thing here in a minute. And this is some sort of animal. Some people think it's a hyena. Some web pages call it a deer. But it goes around, and it's actually, this is part of its tail or something. And this is the spur that our Atlatl would go on. Now, in southern France, they have a whole series of these heads that are finely carved animals that were on Atlatls. This one is carved out of reindeer antler. But this is a replica right here. And this is the real thing. And this is what it looks like in the museum, the antler type thing. And there's a close-up of it. If we go back, this isn't the whole Atlatl. There was another piece that went on the end here, and that's what these holes were for, and they went to tie it all together.
Would that be the same length as some of these you have here?
I don't know.
Oh.
I'm not sure. We tend to think that the effective length for these things is about the length of your arm. That's what we tell people to make them. If they get too big, they're hard to use because you can't control them. If this gets really big, it basically takes and throws your wrist over. Instead of you controlling it, it controls you. If you get one that's too long or too heavy. I really don't know how long those would have been. This is an example of the head where the spur would go on to the cup from Canada. And these would have been hafted onto an Atlatl. And you can see that people got really creative there. This is all the same one. It's just showing different angles. Some sort of face, some sort of tribal figure, and you can see where the spur goes there. So what we have in the archaeological record is we have real fancy Atlatls and we have real basic Atlatls. And a lot of it depends on the artistic ability and the availability of woods and stuff to the people that were making the Atlatl. Now we know if you have carving skills, you can make your shotgun, you can put inlays in it, you'd have all kinds of silver, and you can have the most fanciest shotgun in the world. If you don't have those skills and don't have those means, you're going to have a basic rusty old shotgun, but they're both going to do the job. And the same with Atlatls, they don't really need to be fancy to do the job. Some of them could be as basic as a stick like this with just a little carved piece of wood there. This has a deer antler on it, but it could just be a little piece of wood like some of these are. And you could essentially carve one of these in the woods right before you throw one. Since we were talking about the mechanics here, this last weekend was the West Virginia State Atlatl Championships. This is Mamerto. He's casting a dart, and you can see how it's bending up. Now, when you watch him throw, that dart just goes straight. You have no idea it's doing that. And I wish I would have done this in the movie mode, because that went right into the center of the target. And here's Randy, and you can see his is going down, but it did go up, down, up, down, up. And I just took these pictures last weekend just to show you how these darts look when they're flying in the air there. I want to talk about Atlatl weights a little bit. These are the stones that we put on here. Like I told you before, the Atlatls came into the Americas somewhere around 20 or 30,000 years ago. But when the bow was invented about 15,000 years ago, they didn't reach North America for at least 10,000 years. They came here approximately 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. So there was about a 10,000 year period that the people in North America, Central America, used the Atlatl longer than the rest of the world. And because of that, they advanced it. You know, they made different improvements on the Atlatl that the rest of the world didn't do because they didn't need to. They weren't using it exclusively anymore. They used it side by side when they needed to, but it wasn't really their main hunting weapon. So they went ahead and the North American people went ahead and advanced it. Two things that they did. One was they thinned the Atlatl down to the point where it flexed, and the other thing was they added the Atlatl weight. The North American, Central America is the only cultures in the world that have these Atlatl weights. And these are found all over the Ohio River Valley, these weights. Some of them are highly decorative and some of them aren't. Now, these weights are another thing that's being constantly debated by archaeologists. There's approximately 10 different things that they think these weights were for or what they possibly would have done. Some archaeologists think that they were nothing more than just little fetishes that were carvings of things that they were hunting and or maybe representatives of their culture. Some archaeologists believe that they were just something to put on there to be fancy. It's been proven by a college, I forget which college it was, that we have these banner stones. I'm going to show you some pictures of them. It's been proven that the banner stones silence these Atlatls. They put radio equipment on them, they threw them, then they added the banner stones, threw them again, and you can go on the websites and you can see all the little radio waves and see how it silenced them. Now, whether ancient people knew that or not, we don't know. Now, if they really were used as a silencer, I believe that ancient people knew that. But we don't know if they were really used as a silencer or just one of the things that we picked up on and think that maybe that's what it was for. But there are a few things that we know that these stones really do. One is a counterweight. When ancient hunters were hunting, this Atlatl could have been back behind their head for who knows, 10, 15 minutes. They could have been hiding behind a bush, whatever. And out in front of them, 7 feet in front of them would have been a piece of flint. So these things acted as a counterweight. But more importantly, as I told you before, as you're bringing this forward, your mass is resisting acceleration. These things are trying to arch you, they're fighting you. When that's happening, there's a lot of movement. These things can move in any direction as you're starting your cast, and these things also move also. So what these Atlatl weights do is they provide stability for your throw. When you're bringing it forward, they let you cast your dart and follow through without a whole lot of spinning and whipping around. So we believe that that's one of the main reasons that they're on there. In the archaeological record, these Atlatl weights could be anywhere. They could be on 2 or 3 of them here, they could be down here, there could be 2 or 3 up here, there could be 1 on each side. They've had them all kinds of different ways. And what I believe they were is they were fine-tuning the stability of the Atlatl. And that's what, most of us around here believe that that's what they were doing. So just like a bow, if we had bows, the bow that George might use and the bow that I would use would be different, because you match your bow weights to your own strengths and your own abilities. They come in all kinds of different sizes and different weights. And I believe the Atlatl was the same way. Somebody that might be a little stronger, a little bigger, might not have as many weights as someone else. Someone that has a sloppy throw, whose darts are all over the place, might have more weights. Some people might find that the stone works better for them down here than it works up here. There's a lot of experimentation involved, and you can edit that out. And when we play around with these things and try to figure out what kind of equipment works good for us, we move these stones around. We do it with duct tape to see what, how it works, which way works best. There are various kinds of Atlatl weights. We call them bar stones, bird stones, and banner stones. On your second little bay down here, there's some Indian artifacts. There is one banner stone in there. I don't know if it's local or not, but there is a banner stone. So I'm going to show you some pictures of different kinds of Atlatl weights. Some of them were very, very fancy, highly polished. This is what they call a bird stone. It's not uncommon to see writing on artifacts, and it's an accepted practice with archaeologists. And those writings identify the state, the county, and the archaeological site that they came from. In other words, in Meigs County, there might be 40 or 50 or 60 archaeological sites. They're all cataloged. Each one has a number. And so they can look at that number and be able to tell from what archaeological site they came from. This is another bird stone. It's pretty nice looking. This is that same bird stone, just down on its edge. And it's from Ottawa County. This is a bird stone that you can see has been damaged a little bit for whatever reason. These things have been in the ground for a long time. This one right here is what they call a Popeye. You can see how the eyes are kind of out a little bit. We have no idea why they would have done something like that, but they, archaeologists have named all these things and they call these Popeyes. This is a real nice banner stone. This was found in Ohio. It's about 2,000 or 3,000 years old, I believe. This is banded slate. It's really finely polished. And you can see there's a hole going through there. Now, we'll see a picture of one here in a little bit, but that was basically the Atlatl went right through those banner stones. Now, some people believe that these things were not used as Atlatl weights. Some people believe that they were used to repair broken Atlatls, that you would put two broken pieces into one. These are the weights that are the silencers, the banner stones, the ones that come out. You wouldn't think that something sticking out would be a silencer. Somehow it does. There are some people that believe that these things are nothing more than that were used for a spinning twine and cord, which is something that's used on all Atlatls and darts. We use cordage all the time. And that they were never used for Atlatls at all. They are found with Atlatls, and that's why they were believed that they were used that way.
Are we allowed to ask questions as you're going?
Sure.
Could that not also be used to slide back as you throw it?
I believe that would be too much movement. We don't want these things to move. When we're casting a dart, we need things to be consistent. I would say no, but I don't know. And the reason why I don't believe that they were actually used to repair an Atlatl is because if you stuck two ends of an Atlatl into that thing, it's just not going to work. It's just too much movement, too much play. I don't know anything about computers here. This is a banner stone that's rough, and I put this in here on purpose to show you that everything doesn't have to be finely polished. You can see the hole in the middle. This was just a banner stone that somebody used that didn't have the skills and or didn't have the time to make it pretty. And there wasn't really a need to make it pretty, but it's just the same concept of us making our shotguns pretty. We do it because we can. And I'm one of those guys that believe that ancient people were as smart and as creative as we all are today, and they did what they needed to do, you know. This is I'm not sure what this is made out of. This is another banner stone. This one is from Indianapolis. Most of everything I'm showing you is from Ohio, but I kind of like this one, so I stuck it in there. And that Atlatl shaft would have gone straight through these things. Now, there are, and this is another one from Kentucky. I stuck this in here also because it's not fancy. And it's not really wide, it's just a functional stone. There's a hole in the middle of that one. This one here was 3,500 years old. It's made out of hematite, and they called it an Atlatl weight.
I found one on the old Hope Dairy site. It looks like a loaf of bread. We got hit at least twice by a tractor blade, but you can still see it's got a hump in the like a loaf of bread, the old loaf of breads, and it's more of a high-grade sandstone to me. I don't know exactly what kind of stone it is.
Is it something that you think would have on that lap?
Yeah, that's what I was told.
Okay. Well, we call those bar weights.
Okay.
And here's a bar weight right here. And the reason why this is a cover of a book. The reason why I stuck that in there was so you can see there are plenty of books that just, all they do is cover these stones, these kind of Atlatl weights. And this also is a representation of some different kinds. There's a little barrel thing there, a little ball, and these are the banner stone things here that, the ones that stick out are the ones that kind of drop the weight, drop the size. This is a bird stone. It says Logan County, Ohio. I'm not even sure what Logan County is. I don't know if they meant Hocking County or not. But
West Virginia.
yeah. Well, you would think they would have known what state they were in. But, and somebody with these numbers, I'd be able to identify where that came from. And there might be a Logan County. Here is the picture that I was talking about that shows you how this banner stone would have been on an Atlatl. This is a representation of what a hunter's kit would have had in it. They would have had these 4 shafts, they would have had a dart or 2, and they would have had their Atlatls. Now, most of the time we make ours so that 4 shafts don't come out. But what hunters did, ancient hunters, they made multiple 4 shafts to carry with them because they were the part that stuck in the animal. They were going to break, and they were able to pull the 4 shaft right out, retrieve the dart, which could be nothing more than a stick, or it could have been something fancy like this, and then they would have been able to reload.
Yeah, I guess I'm answering asking all the questions. I read once where the shaft was actually cane. They came out of the Cincinnati, Kentucky area. It was more not bamboo quality, but sturdy like that one.
Yeah. This is river cane. This is river cane. We don't like using bamboo, and I'll tell you why. Because it's kind of heavy.
Well, I don't think it was any bamboo here anyway.
I think that's all. I think it's all river cane. There's over 1,000 kinds of bamboo that grows in the United States. Whether it's native or not, that I don't know. But I'll tell you what they would have used for their shafts. They could have easily have used wood. This one here is made out of ash. And they could have also, they definitely used a fast-growing grass called Phragmites. It looks like cane. It's invasive. The state of Ohio doesn't want you to plant it. You see it along the roads on 70, between 70 and Newark. There's a bunch of patches of it. Anything that grows fast and straight, they would have used as a dart, which would include giant ragweed, possibly roses, any kind of rose bush, anything that had a fast-growing cane. It would have included saplings, and they would have used whatever they could. One of the differences between us and them is when we make our shafts, we want them to last. We want them to last for 2 or 3 years. When they made their equipment, it only lasted 1 or 2 throws sometimes. And if they hit an animal, a buffalo, woolly mammoth, or something with it, and that animal rolled over, these were gone. They were trash. I do want to point out that you don't have to have feathers on these things. There are some people that throw without fletching. We tend to use the fletching because it gives us a little more control of what we're doing. But people that don't use fletching have more weight in the front. And I think in those pictures of those Aborigines, there wasn't feathers on those darts. And theirs were real long. And the feathers also, we match the length of our darts and the way we do our feathers to your own personal preference of how you're going to throw. When I first started throwing, I had a mishmash of equipment. I found out that a 7-foot 3-inch dart was best for me. And that's what I started using. But there are some people that their feathers could be twice as long as these. They'll bring two together and, you know, cut them to make them pretty. There are people that use just real tiny feathers that you see on an arrow, little tiny rubber things. And the way we experiment when we're trying to figure out our feathers is we use duct tape. We'll make feathers out of duct tape, cut them the way we want, and get them to fly. And then we don't like that, we'll take it off and cut more and make them longer, make them shorter. And then we figure out what works best, and then we can replicate that in feathers. That's one way that we do that. Okay, I showed you all the Atlatl weights that are on there. Other stuff that would have been in this kit that hunters would have carried would have been sinew for repairs and possibly glue like pine tar, different kind of saps, honey wax or something like that. Beeswax, I mean. Something that they could use to glue this sinew together once they get it all. Also might possibly have leather. I brought a bunch of Atlatls here that you guys can play with whenever you want. These three are made by Mamerto. He lives outside of Albany. They're kind of decorative, a little more decorative than we usually do. This group here is made from Ray Strichik, who lives in Athens. And those over there are ones that I made. Sometimes we don't make them functional, we just make them to play with. I put this deer horn on here to just to do it. But this thing is actually too heavy to use as an Atlatl. And it broke on me, and that's why you got all this here. It is usable, but normally we want the whole system to be as light as possible. We're looking for the whole thing to be under a pound. Okay?
Can you talk a little bit about grips? You have some that have,
Yeah.
you know, one finger and
Sure.
others that are bigger, and that one is for 2 fingers?
There's basically 2 ways to hold an Atlatl. One is the hammer, we call it the hammer throw. We hold it like that, like a hammer. And then the other one is the basket maker. And the basket maker is when we're holding it like a softball. We can hold it like that. We can hold it like that. You can put any one finger in there you want. This one here with the leather, you can use your 2. You know, my hand is basically in a softball type hold. I believe it was Arizona or somewhere in that area where they found a bunch of Atlatls that were held this way, and the tribes of people that lived there happened to be basket makers. So they call this the basket maker hold.
Okay.
And that's one of the ways to do it. These are the type of Atlatls that we use when we teach people how to do it. And we put this here, people can go like that, they can go like that, or they can stick with the hammer throw like that. When we're teaching people how to do this, we tend to use rigid equipment because we don't want too much stuff broken. And since they don't really know some of the how to do it, sometimes the flexible things go flying through the air, and we just don't want to fix that kind of stuff. So those are the 2 basic kind of holds. We kind of tell people when you're throwing, your wrist has to flip all the way over. So we tell people to hold these in their hands the way that's going to be comfortable for their wrist to go all the way over. We had a man in Pennsylvania who's passed away now, but he took a mold of his hand and he took a whole bunch of crushed walnut shells and epoxy, and his Atlatl handle was basically his hand. And he just would grab it like that. He was the basket maker type hold. It would fit in there. Like when we're competing, we want to have as little stuff to think about as possible. So we want these things to slip right into our hand the same way every way. And what people do is they'll carve little spots where their fingers will go into place. And and just customize things to fit their hand.
So you throw basically overhand like with a baseball, right?
We have it like this, we bring it forward and flip it.
Okay.
It has to flip all the way over. For some reason, Roberto made this reversible. I don't know why, but he was just playing. Like he plays it. This Atlatl here, about 10 years ago, they found 40 Atlatls in a cave in Oregon that were made out of whalebone. And they were all crushed. They put them all, they were able to piece them back together as many as they could. They put the dimensions and pictures and all that in a magazine, and I carved 2 of them out of wood of those exact same dimensions. This has happened to break. But this would have been whalebone, and this little cup here would have been natural part of the bone. I made 2 of these. One of them is in a museum in Portsmouth, and this is one we play with. This is made out of walnut. The other one was made of osage. This little thing here, these little palm grips, you'll see them on a lot of these Atlatls. What they're basically for is to help you keep the Atlatl in position the whole time you're casting. So these can take all kinds of shapes. They can go left, they can go right. If you want these things to fit in your palm. When we're messing with these things, wherever we get a blister, that's where we know we need to do a little work. And then once we fine tune them to fit our hands, then that's the way we use them. As you can see, we can make these out of a simple branch. I want to talk about this for a second. These are dart rest that people have come up with. You'll see various kinds on here. We have a little piece of leather in there. There really aren't many dart rests in the archaeological record. This is something that people came up with just to help us be able to control the thing. When we're teaching kids how to do this, if they have to hold on to the dart while they're throwing, it'll never happen. So when we have these dart rests on here, basically when you lift up once you get your Atlatl, the spur in the cup, once you lift it up, it'll stay there without having to hold on to it. And that helps the kids be able to do it. But this is how ancient people would have done it. Their dart rest is their fingers. It would have gone just like that. Now, we teach a lot of kids how to do this and adults, and if we tried to have them hold like this, we wouldn't get anywhere with them. They wouldn't have any fun. They would never be able to really cast the dart. Because sometimes when we're teaching kids, we don't really have them that long. But with these dart rests like that, it takes that little element out of it, and the kids can really throw. But that is how an ancient person would have held their dart in there. When I first started doing this, I liked having the dart in my hand, but I got used to not holding it. This is another style. This was my first competition Atlatl, I believe. It's cracked a couple of different spots. But on this one right here, we pinch it like that. We still have a dart rest, but it's not going to stay there by itself because we don't have that V with the leather. So this is one way, and this is a common way for people to throw.
Would you ever use 2 hands, like with your other one where you just hand it halfway down?
No, you mean like this?
Yeah?
Well, people put them out there to get loaded,
Okay.
but no, because it's just too much stuff in the way. And also your left hand helps balance your body. Some people will hold their left hand out like this. I tend to hold mine down by the side, but this is something that it would throw them off kilter. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the modern history. In the early to mid 80s, a group of archaeologists in Colorado wanted to start playing with Atlatls, and they made them, and they created a golf game with them, and they would go around and keep score just like we would playing golf. They'd have different stations, go around and do this, do that, and they soon realized that that really wasn't determining what their skill levels were. They were just playing. A man in Louisiana named Lloyd Pine came up with a contest we call it the International Standard Accuracy Contest. And he came up with a contest where people all around the world can throw these things and we can compare our scores with each other. Basically, he created a target You saw it in there when Roberto was throwing the white target. It's an enlarged pistol target of some sort with a X 10-9-8-7-6. The center of the target is approximately 100 centimeters from the ground, and we throw in groups of 3 to 5 people. We throw 5 darts from 15 meters and 5 darts from 20 meters. We use the exact same score sheet as the guy in Belgium is going to use, and we send them all to the same people. And that way, we can compare each other's scores without having to travel around the world and kind of compete against each other, which would be nice, I guess. I kind of correlate it to like a guys running the 100-yard dash. You know, you take your top score, your fastest run, and you chart it, and that way you can see, you know, who's the fastest guy in the world without even running against each other. You know, they have their charted times, and that's kind of how I correlate it. So they created the International Standard Accuracy Contest. We call it the ISAC, ISAC. It's thrown at probably every weekend all over the world. We throw from January 1st till the end of November. That's our season. And then during the month of December, they calculate the scores, and they come out with whoever is the top 10 in the world that year. They come up with the scores. I copied 2 or 3 of them here, but I have here, you guys all take one with you, a whole bunch of websites on top, and you'll be able to get these on the websites. Now this is dated July. They're going to be updating it here pretty soon. And this tells us, like I said, you can score 110 X's, which is the highest score you can possibly get. The world record score is, I think, 98 with 5 X's, something like that. And they only list you on this list if you've scored over a 70 in a contest. So on men's, it goes down to 70. Women's is different, children are different. On men's, it goes down to 70. And so there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people below 70 that aren't on this list. The number 1 in the world right now is a man from Portsmouth, Ohio, and he made his throw at the Athens Library. On June 28th, he made his throw of a 97X. The person behind him, number 2 in the world, is a 4-time world champion. So he's hot on Mike's trail. We're hoping that Mike makes it. Mike's been in the top 10 in the world for at least 10 years in a row, but he's having trouble getting into first place. He's in first place now. His atlatl is rigid, it doesn't flex at all, and it is a deer leg, basically. The lower part of a deer leg, and it looks like a deer leg. And it's got all kinds of seal on it to keep it together. He's been using that same atlatl for over 15 years, where most of us, 3 or 4 years, and we've pretty much worn out and or broken. I brought a few of these, you're welcome to take them. But like I said, this information is updated all the time, and it's on the internet. If you go through here and look at it, you'll see West Virginia, Pennsylvania, New York, and Ohio is a hotbed of throwers, and we pretty much dominate the top 15 or 20 in both the men's and women's. Those 4 or 5 states are pretty dominant. Of course, you know, there are other ones, Arizona, Switzerland, and Belgium. But I'm looking down here, Ohio, New York, Missouri, Ohio, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, Ohio. We have some very, very good throwers around here. And so that means when we get together, we have some pretty exciting contests. Now that's the world thing. In about somewhere in the mid-90s, a local man here named Ray Stristick got interested in the atlatl. Him and his father, a woman named Connie Harse, and 2 or 3 other people in Ohio, and a couple of people from other states formed what they call the Ohio Atlatl Association. And you'll find that most states have an Atlatl Association. They come and go because, you know, some people, you know, they get disinterested. Like all organizations, sometimes it's hard to keep them going. Some groups, like the New York Atlatl Association, has hundreds of members. And we probably have about 80 in Ohio, where some other groups, like Illinois, might only have 10 people in their Atlatl Association. But they still have one, and they still try to have contests. So the Ohio Atlatl Association, you know, we go around and we try to promote the use and the education of the device. We go to Boy Scouts, we go to Girl Scouts, we do 4-H groups. We have about 10 or 15 contests in Ohio every year. There's 3 more contests left in Ohio. And they, on that piece of paper with the web pages, which I want you guys to take, I listed our last 3 competitions. Next weekend, this coming weekend here, we're going to be at the Plains Indian Mound Festival. If you guys want to come up and throw, we're going to be there. A couple weeks after that, we're going to be at a little spot in Gloucester. And then the last weekend of this month, we're going to be at the Zaleski State Forest. And that'll be our last contest of the year for Ohio. We have some really good throwers around here. Mamerto, who made these 3 Atlatls, lives in Albany. He was world champion about 3 years ago. And Ray Strichtek, who started the Ohio Atlatl Association, was world champion in 1997. And hopefully we'll get our 3rd Ohio championship this year if Mike can hold it, if he can hold out, if these other guys don't get ahead of him. We had a woman last year in Albany that was 2nd in the world. We've had a kid that lives outside of Albany that was 2nd in the world about 8 years ago. And he kind of grew out of it. He doesn't do it anymore. That happens. I want to touch on hunting a little bit. It's illegal to hunt with these in Ohio. It's illegal to hunt with them in West Virginia. You are allowed to hunt with them in Ohio on a private game reserve. It is legal in Pennsylvania. It just became legal. They worked for years and years to do that. They're working on it in New York. Tennessee, I think we have 1 day. Missouri, I think there's 2 or 3 days it's legal. All of the southern states are legal. And in Ohio, we have a real active guy in Cincinnati that really wants to hunt with these things really bad. He does it on game reserves, but he wants to do it like all the other hunters do.
So you couldn't do it on your own land?
No.
Say if you have a large farm?
Not legally.
How
So,
would you have to be qualified to hunt? I mean, just anybody could, I could pick one up and walk out and try to kill something with it, or?
in a legal state?
Yeah, in a legal state, do you
Sure.
have to have a certain level of competency, or?
I don't think so.
You don't have a license?
I know with guns and that, you have to be gun trained. I don't think the archers are trained, and I doubt if they are. All states have different rules, and I'm not familiar with all that. One of the web pages on that paper deals with hunting specifically, and all the states have their different rules. I kind of doubt it, that you would have to go through any sort of training to do that. I know people that have killed deer with these things. I know a guy that killed a deer with these on his very first shot at a deer ever. It wasn't his first shot with an Atlatl, but it was his first shot at a deer. I know people that have killed groundhogs with them in their backyard, which is illegal in Ohio. But he did it in Pennsylvania, so we won't tell on him. There's a guy in New York, Thunderbird Atlatl. He's on the webpage there. He made this one, and he teaches hunting classes. And he'll get 10 or 15 people. They'll go out and they'll make Atlatls. They'll get their darts together. They'll make their flint points, and they're on a hunting reserve. They'll go after a deer. They'll get the deer, and they'll actually skin it with flint, and they'll butcher it. And then they'll actually start a fire with ancient firing techniques, and they'll cook it. And that's all part of a program that he does to teach people how to go through all the steps of all this stuff in an ancient way, and use all these little parts of the deer. He'll teach them how to tan the hide and all this stuff. So there's a big group of people that are interested in hunting. It doesn't really affect me too much, but I do, like in Pennsylvania when they wanted to make it legal, I did sign the petition because I wanted to support them. We have a guy in Cincinnati that really wants to hunt with them really bad. Every year before hunting season started, which it just started last Saturday for the bow, he always calls the Department of Natural Resources and says, when are we going to make this thing legal? He gets a different story every time. I saw him last weekend. Sure enough, a couple weeks ago he called him, and this time they told him it's not going to happen in his lifetime. I don't really know what all that means. I don't really know why it's not legal in Ohio. In Pennsylvania, when they worked to make it legal, they brought the Pennsylvania Game Commission to a spot. Every one of them throwed it. They all liked it, and then they tabled it. Nothing happened for like 5 years. Finally, they made it legal. So.
Well, those big, powerful bows are scarier to me than this.
Yeah. So.
And they're legal for 6 or 8 months.
The reason why I think it's illegal in Ohio is because it won't generate any revenue. If they tried to, if they had if they made Atlatls legal for hunting, they might, in Ohio, they might have 5 or 10 people that would register for a license, pay their $50 or whatever it is, and that would be that. But I guarantee you, if you had 500 people that said they would have, they wanted a license tomorrow, and they were going to pay $100 each or whatever it costs for a hunting license, I think the state of Ohio would change their mind. And that's the way I look at it, but I don't really know why they don't, why it's illegal in Ohio. They do use these for fishing, the same way that you would use a bow. They would put a barb tip on the end of it, and they would tie a string onto it, and flip it in the water and bring a fish out. Now, we have an Atlatl contest in Kentucky every 3 or 4 years where they have a fishing contest. We are going to do it next year. We haven't done it for a couple of years in a row here. So as part of the Ohio Atlatl Association, you know, we teach people all around. We actually one year went up to Columbus and we taught teachers how to teach their class how to do it. And we had a hands-on thing where they made Atlatls right there. We went to the Flint Ridge State Park. They brought teachers and park rangers in there, and we taught them how to make all this stuff, how to do the feathers, and how to teach their class how to do it. For about 12 years, it just ended 2 years ago, for 12 years in a row, we taught every 5th grader in Vinton County how to do this. The last Friday of October, they brought them all out by buses, and it got to the point where the teachers were so familiar with us and so familiar with coming out there that the teachers started ordering history books that had the Atlatl in it to help the students, you know, tie it all into everything. Now, 2 or 3 years ago, the Vinton County schools consolidated into 3 schools. And once that happened, we went out there that one time. Only a couple schools came because the school board was making the individual schools pay for the school bus travel out to there. The schools couldn't do it, and it stopped about 2 years ago. So there's not too many people in Vinton County that haven't thrown these things because they went home and told their parents about them too. So that was kind of exciting, teaching all those kids. So these are, you know, you're welcome to mess with these. I can talk about any particular aspect of them that you want to do, that you might want to talk about. These you can fondle these too if you want. When I was going through my computer, the other computer, and digging out pictures off my files to try to throw into this little presentation, I was trying to find things that would, you know, show the banner stones and show what the different kits look like. But it was pretty much impossible for me to dig out all those files and not put a picture of the grandkids in there. Because they were all over. This is Finian, this is McLean, that's Ollie, and that's Crosby.
Well, I was going to ask you, how young are the kids you teach?
Well, it's hard for a child below 5 years old to do this, but we have some special equipment. We have some real light Atlatls, and we have some real short darts. Because every once in a while we get a 4-year-old child or a 5-year-old child that just really wants to do it, and we want them to do it. We want to accommodate them. So we have some small equipment to the side. Small darts aren't aerodynamic. They need to be long to fly, but at least they can do it. Now, and if an adult took one of those short darts and flew it, it basically would just go right up or right down. They don't have the mass to bring these things forward. Which is something that I neglected to say when I was talking about the mechanics of these things, is that what makes these things work was the mass in the front. The mass drew these things into the game. And these things went into the game farther than a bow and arrow would. Even though the bow and arrow was going a lot faster and a lot truer path, these things drew way into the game. One year, Ray Strischik and his father Martin set up a couple bales, and they took they took a dart, flipped a couple darts into a bale of hay, and then they took their archery equipment and fired in arrows right next to these, and these things were in a lot farther than the arrows were. Just because of the mass. The mass is what made these things work so good. Another thing about these for hunting is that ancient hunters didn't have to have as tight of a kill zone as modern hunters do. Modern hunters have a little spot where they're aiming for the vitals, and when these things go into an animal, they're not straight like an arrow is. They could be in any sort of way. So when they would go into that vital spot, they would actually rip through multiple organs at once. And so the ancient kill zone wasn't as small as the vital zones that they use today to make a good kill on it. Well, any questions that we didn't cover? I have, the Ohio Atlatl Association publishes a newsletter a couple times a year. I brought a pile of them there of old newsletters. There's various dates. I just brought some and threw them in here. And you're welcome to take one or two different ones through there. They'll show you some of the different types of articles that we deal with. They'll show you some of the different kinds of contests we put together. They'll show you who wins some of our contests. And they'll show you how to mail in your $5 if you want, if you want to join. And also definitely, if you don't want to take a newsletter, that's fine, but definitely take the web pages and our last event flyer there. But take a newsletter with you, otherwise I'll take them all. And if there's no other questions, you guys are welcome to, if you want to mess with some of these and have any specific questions, we can do that. Thank you.